Welcome to the Pastel Society of America's demonstration by Master Pastelist Terri Ford, Illuminate Your Paintings. A native Californian and an alumnus of the Academy of Art College, Terri has been working with pastels since 1987, both in the studio and on plein air. Her work has earned her top awards at the National Arts Club in New York, the Butler Fine Art Museum, the Triton Museum of Art, the Autry Museum, the Hagen Museum, and many more. She has received numerous awards at the Carmel Art Festival plein air events, including Plein Air Magazine's Award of Excellence and Best Pastel in 2015. Ford's pastels have been featured in American Art Collector, American Artist, Fine Art Connoisseur, Pratique des Arts, and also in several coffee table books. Terri achieved both Master Circle and Eminent Pastelist status at the International Association of Pastel Societies. She is also a Master Pastelist with the Pastel Society of America, Distinguished Pastelist with the Pastel Society of the West Coast and the Pastel Society of New Mexico, and an artist member of the California Art Club. She was the invitée d'honneur of the Art de Pastel France. Please join us in welcoming Terri Ford.
Hi. I'm going to start this demonstration the way I start all of my paintings, which is with a drawing. I've always loved drawing, and I do not do thumbnails or studies, but I just enjoy the process of drawing, so I kind of just dive in and start that. And I capture values, tones, and I'm getting in tune with the subject matter as opposed to starting something with just abstract shapes, which is an academic way that I know works for many people, but as a lover of drawing, I can't do anything but this. It's just the way I work, it's the way I think. And I'm getting in tune with the subject matter as I do this. I know that I'm doing a tree. I'm not doing a shape. It represents something. It is the subject that I'm painting, and I really feel that I have to get in tune with that right off the start. It may seem like when the drawing's done, I go, oh, I like that drawing. Some of the times, not all the time, but I really feel like and then I do an underpainting, which really kind of erases the drawing, and yet I don't think back. Once I've moved on to the underpainting, I am still, I'm moving on. And I usually will photograph the painting at that final drawing phase before I start the underpainting. But I really relish this whole process of working with the subject from the very beginning as opposed to breaking it down into abstract shapes. And a big part of my technique that you'll see further down the road is sculpting. And once I've done the underpainting and filled in the solid areas, I will usually overpaint the darks, meaning I exceed the actual shape of the dark. And the reason I do that is for something that I find very fun to do is sculpting, so that I'm playing back and forth between the light and the dark area. And by having the dark down, I can go in with the tree. In this case, there will be sky holes in this tree, which is the tree's a silhouette. So I make more of a silhouette out of it. I leave notes, visual notes, and take mental notes of the sky holes while I'm doing this phase. But when I do the underpainting, they'll get obscured. And then part of my painting process is to go back in then and redefine and design those sky holes. And the same for all the foliage that's up against the edges of the sky, or where dark meets light, sky meets tree. That's all things I can do in a kind of back and forth sculpting matter with this technique. But as you can see, I'm just starting with the drawing. It's an all-important part of my work. So I just proceed to fine-tune the drawing, emphasizing darks are always, I use a lighter pressure when I'm on lesser dark areas. In the case of this painting, the trees to the right, upper right, and the bush to the left are the silhouettes, and they're the vertical masses that are always going to be the darkest. And then the low-lying foliage is not going to be as dark. So as I proceed with this, I will add, I'll rub and use the side of that, the 305 pastel that I'm using. I failed to mention my equipment at this point, which is UART 400, and it's mounted on board, and the 305 new pastel, which I'm sorry to say is no longer available. I just happen to have some because I ordered multiples of it at some point. So I've gotten very low. I'm not going to be able to use them much longer, but I do happen to still have them in stock. It was kind of funny that Dakota created a page with a link to a page of alternates for the 305 new pastel. And I consider myself somewhat responsible for that because it was on my materials list for all of my workshops. And I said, if you bring nothing more than just your own pastels and paper, bring the 305 new pastel. And I referred so many people. I said, Dakota sells it. So anyhow, it was really nice of them to create an alternates link. So, and the reason I use the 305 is because of the new pastels. It's a harder pastel, which I want to work with in this stage. It'll allow me a translucent underpainting, and it's the darkest of the new pastels aside from black. So this way I'm able to get the widest range of value. So this painting is now ready for the underpainting. And I use isopropyl alcohol. I was lucky enough to find 99% isopropyl alcohol through Amazon. And this high content of alcohol works for me. It has just the right amount of flow and drying time. And now we have the brush selection. I use stiff bristle brushes. They're used painting brushes and nothing fancy. The stiffer, the better. They start out square and they end up getting worn down with use, which those tips come in handy at times. But the reason I use these stiff brushes over sponge brushes or watercolor brushes is because they give me the control so I can move my pastel around in the direction that I want, which is just the way I draw it. So now I'm beginning the wash part of the painting, and I still stick with the directional measures that I took in the drawing. And as you also can see, the drawing itself is being erased, but that's my guide for the painting. And since I always work like this, I think of it as drawing. It's not a wasted drawing. It contributes to the painting. And, you know, as opposed to having sketchbooks around, because I don't ever really sit around and sketch, my drawings are all on my paintings and have just led to the final result of a painting. Sometimes I think, well, I should have stuck with the drawing, but anyway, this is part of the process, and I'll stick with the gestural directions of the elements and just proceed on. And these are the darkest darks that I'm doing right now, but I'll be leading to other areas that are not as dark and that have are a little lighter and washed out. But I put the darkest darks in first. And as I progress, I start putting in mid-tones with the 305. I'm allowing more liquid there, and that's also where I just didn't apply quite as much dark pastel. So it's giving me these nice shadows, all with just the one color of 305. And I'm darkening the light spots on the dunes where the dune shadow is. I'm showing that with this lighter value, just brushing over it. So it really starts to take shape as a tonal piece up to this point. So now I'm just continuing to wash the pastel with the alcohol, being mindful of values, putting things in darker than they may appear in the final so that I have some good tone to work on. I love having my lights lay down on tone. I just find them more brilliant, and I think it provides more depth to the subject by having this whole layer. And then you'll see me do some secondary colors, or a couple other colors in the next phase. So I've just finished up the very end of the lightest part of the sand, just with a very pale wash of whatever was left. And I'm starting on my sky is a purple. It is something I've used from time to time in sky. Blue lays over it nicely. This is a new pastel, and it will wash very clearly, but also translucently, which is what I am after in my underpaintings. And now I'm starting the brushwork on the sky. I'm keeping it looser with more water, and because I laid down such a light layer of violet, I'm able to just move it around easily. And here I'm switching directions because the clouds are going in a right diagonal as opposed to the diagonal direction that I had laid the first layer of the wash in. So this is just a directional correction that I made as I add some yellow to the sky as well. And as I'm washing this with the brush, you'll see me streak it across behind, well, it's going over the bush at the end, but it's to draw that warmth in because there is some warmth in the sky there. And now for more color. I'm applying just small amounts and dabs of red, and I'll be doing some orange as well. And this will create a warmth in the foreground. So at this point, I take stock of the painting to check to see that I have enough light and dark. Dark primarily is what I'm checking for. Did I get it dark enough? I usually can see that I did not, or that I would like to have more tone. And so my next step will be to add more dark to it. And that will continue. I will add some more tone to the water, needed a little more oomph to it, and to the shadows on of the sand. I definitely want to add a tone to that. And anywhere that is representing the sand in shadow is going to get marked with this blue, or I'm going to reinforce it with dark. And I'll just continue with this until I'm satisfied. I'm going to add some dark, and then now probably finishing up with this blue of the sand, the shadowed sand. And then I'll begin the brush work. Through most of this wash process, I will stick with the darks first and working just loosely around those blue spots. I want to maintain the blueness of those as much as possible. There will be some residual 305 on the brush, which shows here. I want that. I like that amount of tone that's going down. And however, if that happens in other spots, that's fine with me too. Again, I say, when in doubt, go dark. So it's just happening on the little spots of sand to the right, but I know they're there now. I'm pretty clear on where the values are, so I can darken the lights, which is how I like to work. I do highly recommend that you take that time and do a second step of underpainting should you feel you need it. It can be very beneficial. So now I'm starting with local color, and I'm laying down a dark, which is going to be covered by the lighter spot I made on the board. But it's my way of mixing color. I didn't want that light blue all the way across, so I laid down the darker blue, and now I'm just covering it with the lighter blue, and then I'll leave the rest of that sky will be lighter. So there's kind of a blend of sorts by doing it this way, by just putting one color on top of another so that it's not as light as it is on its own, and but it will be light where you want it. And while I'm doing this, I'm kind of playing with the edges on the tree. But you'll see now where the blue sky blends and becomes a lighter blue. And it's a subtle thing, but I knew that I didn't want it all the light blue. I wanted to have that variation in the sky because that's coming off of the yellow and pinks of this sun setting. So it only makes sense that it would be lighter as it's closer to the sun. Blending in a little bit of rose pink there. You know, my palette for this painting is very blue and purpley. You could choose to work in a whole different palette range. It could be, well, I guess what I would call a more realistic palette, and use, you know, more muted tones. And one thing it's an important point I'd like to make is that as you lay down your colors, and if you put them in darker like I often do, then you can see how this light blue neutralized that dark blue. It worked to make a blend, but also neutralized it. I often work with bright color first, and then layer it with what I call neutralizing. And if something seems too garish or too wild, then you can always put something over it and have both colors working together to create the effect that you want. And that's another wonderful thing about this process of keeping a light touch throughout as you're applying your pastel, because that enables you to make adjustments as you go. And, you know, every painting takes on its own life and form, and at certain points you're following that. You know, you see something that's happened, which means something you did, essentially, and you react to that as opposed to where you think you might have been going. So this is the possibilities with this technique are endless in terms of colors that you can use with other colors. It's just endless. You can use a warmer underpainting. My 305 tends to be a cooler color. Although that is another reason I really like the 305 is that it wasn't 100% cool. It had it's called spruce green, actually, is the name of the color. Or was it spruce blue? Either way, there was a bit of warmth in it. But I know of pastelists that use warm colors in their underpainting, and of course your palette can be completely different from mine, and it's the technique of getting the darks in and set so that you can then have the freedom to make so many adjustments and have that layer that's going to stay there for you and really be your guide throughout. It's the it's kind of the master design that stays put, and yet you can cover it as much as you want. Now, moving down from the sky, I'll be, I call it noodling sometimes. I'm just going with my instincts and adding texture to the darks, accentuating darks, but also adding midtones in some places. So it's just a nice play between light and dark.
You'll see me going back and forth with the probably the 305 or one of my dark pastels, and then the lights, just because at this point it's back and forth between the lights and the darks. It's primarily a light and dark piece. There's not a lot of mid-tone to it. So I'll just be switching back and forth between the light and the dark as I just work my way through this foliage. So now I'm attacking those little, I'm not sure what they're called, but I'm laying them down in a yellow, and they'll be lightened further with a pink tone. Just still working my way through little spots that grab my attention. And getting to the water. I'm glad I'm doing that now, because that just needs to be done and settled and then I can move forward with other things. And here was a little too light, so I'm darkening it with kind of the opposite of what I did up top with the sky. Started too light and then corrected it with something a little darker. And I'll be getting into little marks of foliage. And this is a fun part. I really enjoy this sort of little detail work. I've got enough information in the painting now to just go ahead and, as I come to a spot, work with it. Then I'm just as likely to bounce over to something else. But oh no, I'm sticking with this tree silhouette, and this is some sculpting I'm doing, which is a really fun thing for me. And that's why I overpaint. The bushes are one of the more common things that I overpaint, so that I can create edges in the shape of it, ultimately in this manner. Starting to add some bits of light here and there. Because you do have, for the most part, these two large silhouettes, and then you have a lot of foliage in shadow, but there is light coming from that light source, the sun setting, and establishing that direction. It's all coming from the left, so that the right is shadow heavy. Adding more dark into the shadow of that silhouette. Picking out a few of the key hot spots for the light. Even with the light that I'm putting, for instance, on the left side of the tree or the bush, and on some of the foliage, it's going down. I'm using a really nice olive there, And I'll go back over later as I'm just doing some of the fine tuning and tweak those to a little bit lighter, but just in some spots so that there's definitely the texture of both values going on in the foliage. I've put on some music very softly so that I can just focus on working through this painting, and you have a little bit of something to listen to. Something I haven't mentioned is where this subject is. I'm a California girl and spend a lot of time painting in Carmel and Pacific Grove. This is a dune in Pacific Grove. So what I've just done is to break up that purple mass that was a little bit too predominant, and broke it up with some foliage, and now have been lightening it to what I think is a more correct value there. The sand at that point, even though it is in shadow, it's long cast shadows that are lighter than the shadows on the dune and in the other portions, because they have more light exposure. So I'm working on that foreground light now. I'm slowly but surely adding more, it's what I call calligraphy at this point, these little marks that are really for texturizing the foliage, little twiglets, and I'm fine-tuning these trees against the sky. And in the sky hole area, I'll be adding a little bit of branches and then refining the sky holes. And back to a little more sculpting of the bush. And I found the lightest color for the sand because that is catching light as well, just not as much as the foreground. Hitting that foreground with some hot spots. Calligraphy. It's fun in the landscape to be able to do all this what some might call scribbling, but it's really, when you're intentional about it, it's just a lot of fun to create random foliage that's so natural, and the more random it is, the more natural it looks. So all of those shapes are now getting extended into having life. I think I'm getting close to some of the final light marks. What I'm doing is illuminating my painting, and I hope you can see how this underpainting and the setting of it really enables you to illuminate your paintings. I think I'll stop at this point, and thank you so much for watching. I want to thank the Pastel Society of America, and Jimmy Wright, the president of the Pastel Society, Susan Story for inviting me to create this demo, and you, of course, for taking the time to watch it. And I truly hope that you're able to glean something from it. Thank you again.